The irony of our sharing today is that we were initially slated to share in this service in a worship planning session held the first week of January. Who could have imagined the urgent importance that today's topic would have now compared to the less complex days of just 4 months ago?
It is no secret that Randall and I are overachievers, endless organizers and planners, maximizing every day. In our early years of marriage, as we were beginning our careers and working on graduate degrees, we quickly came to recognize that our conversations were often peppered with phrases such as, when we, as soon as we, someday when, we soon recognized that we were neglecting the life we were living in the present in deference to an imagined life in which all things would be better, less fearful for the Enneagram 6, and more perfect for the Enneagram 1. We began to call this pattern postponing our happiness, and we started calling each other out on it, a practice that has lasted throughout our 36 years of marriage.
What we started to recognize that was that the life we were living in a cold and damp 1940s built seminary apartment in the 1980s was good, and we needed to call it out. That the period of dealing with my brother's death in our late 20s and 11 years of infertility into our mid-30s was also a time filled with much to celebrate. That the struggles that we had with 5 failed adoptions, my unexpectedly being embroiled in Baptist political politics, were periods of our lives filled with both deep pain and many unanticipated joys. This pattern has continued with struggles that we've had with raising children, job changes, aging parents, until we find ourselves where we are today.
What does it mean to postpone happiness when you receive the news that you have inoperable stage 4 pancreatic cancer? When you are told that you have from 3 to 11 months to live, what are the implications of postponing happiness? When we initially agreed to share about postponing happiness, we had no idea how urgent this subject really was. If we had only known in January what we know now, we would have had 4 extra months to live in this renewed time of living more fully. A time frame that seems like an eternity of good health from where we stand today.
So what does it mean not to postpone happiness? To live authentically with the reality that God surprises us? How do we live out our motto in these days? The reality is that we're still figuring it out. Just as we were unsure of what living in the moment meant as newlyweds in the 1980s, struggling to live on less than $12,000 a year and studying and working around the clock, we're now struggling with what it means to count our days and hours in this time, to measure each day as if it were our last, to live authentically and to authentically live in these days. In reality, today we have fewer pat answers than we did in our 20s. Yet some days, these days feel a lot like our 20s.
While we now have a comfortable home, a stronger financial outlook, amazing children, and a host of the when-we things that we once dreamed about, life is more and more lived in the simplicity of smaller things. The same sort of small things we celebrated in those earlier days. Walks down the street, sitting together in the quietness of our living room, reading poetry and smiling, eating a simple meal together and talking, drinking a cup of tea, sharing a popsicle, and most importantly, time spent with family, phone calls to relatives, reconnecting with friends from the past, hugging those we love a little tighter, forgiving more frequently, sweating the small things a little less.